All right. I'm
Get
gonna
onto
minimize
it.
this. All right. Well, welcome everybody to Modern Agent Blueprint. I'm super excited because today we're going to be talking about the art of negotiation in the real estate industry. So, as you know, the art of negotiation is something I feel like is kind of learned. I don't know that everyone is just a born negotiator. Although I do feel like toddlers are pretty good at negotiating for what they want. So, I feel like we all kind of learn, there's certain things that we want and we have to just figure out the best way to get them. And in real estate, sometimes it can be kind of hard because you have obviously two people fighting for what they think is right for their clients. So, you might not see eye to eye on everything that you want. So we have to figure out how to kind of come up with the best kind of middle ground for everybody. So everyone ends up being happy. So we're going to hop right into it. So, why is negotiation like such a big deal in real estate, right? So there's several different factors. So there's obviously a financial impact. Effective negotiation can really increase your client's savings or their profit, depending on which side of the deal you're in. So let's say your client, realizes that they're going to need a new roof. So we have to now negotiate either a $10,000 price reduction or concessions in order to get some sort of something to help them basically with, the transaction, to help them feel better about the house that they're buying. Stress reduction. Being able to confidently navigate those negotiations can really minimize the stress for both the buyers and the sellers. If you're able to come into it with a cool head and you're able to come into it very confidently when you're negotiating on something, it's going to help reduce the stress of the seller or the buyer, because you're going to be able to say, listen, here's the options, and this is something we'll talk about in a little bit too, about kind of the different things that I do, when I'm working with people, some things that I like, some takeaways that it's really helped me with some of my negotiations. So we'll talk about that as well in a little bit.
Well, and I'm just going to add, like, the reason why your clients are hiring you more than likely are for these reasons of negotiating. You're able to provide a different perspective because you're not emotionally attached, where to them, they're very emotionally involved, whether it's the seller or the buyer, and there's always that financial impact. So, your negotiating skills are extremely important and come into play, with representing your client.
Absolutely. And obviously with negotiation skills, if you're able to negotiate a great deal, you can really expedite your transaction. You can, reduce the time that the houses are on the house on the market, or how quickly you can get the deal to closing table. Relationship building. If your client feels like you went to bat for them and you really negotiated a great deal for them, do you think that they're going to send you referrals? Like, do you think that they're going to refer you to every friend and family that they have? Absolutely. And, I feel like when you do a great negotiation and you work really hard for your clients, even if it doesn't work out well for the other side, I feel like those other agents still respect you and they realize like you handled your stuff through this transaction and you did a great job for your clients. I have worked with many clients and the agent on the other side was like, wow, you really worked really hard for that client. Like you did a great job. And that makes you feel good because then that if they see your name again, likely, obviously I'm not going into it being a jerk or anything. Like we are all here, us agents are all trying to get to the same spot. We're all trying to get to that closing table. So there's no reason to be a complete jerk with your negotiations. And that's something we can talk about a little bit too in a minute. So the fundamentals of negotiations. Now, these are funny because I had never really heard of these, but they make sense. So BATNA, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So this is the best outcome that you can achieve if the current negotiation fails. So knowing what your alternative is going to give you leverage and confidence. So this is where that other agent, the listing agent, says, well, just so you know, during inspection, if anything comes up, we do have a backup. We do have that backup offer just in case. So, you know, you have a little bit of leverage. So then it kind of makes you, as on the buy side, you know, I'll tell my clients, listen, we have to tread lightly here. We can't go in just guns blazing, asking for every single little thing that comes up on an inspection. We have to tread a little bit lightly because they could tell us no, and they can go right to the next buyer if we don't want to move forward. So we have to tread really lightly here. And then the other one is the zone of possible agreement. So this is the range in which an agreement is satisfactory to both partners or both people. Sorry. So, you know, again, it's a negotiation, right? So maybe the buyer, they're willing to go up to 500, but you don't want them to go up to 500 if they don't have to. And the seller's willing to take 480, but we don't really know that. So it's going to be coming up to kind of figure out where that zone is that we're going to be able to have a great outcome for both people. Nikki, do you want to take this one?
Sure. Okay. So the fundamentals of negotiation. Obviously, we want it to be a win-win versus a win-lose situation. There's got to be a way to negotiate where everybody wins. So in doing this, each party feels like they get some kind of value. Now, if it's a win-lose, one party feels like obviously they're losing something. So we don't want the buyer to feel like they're getting gypped out of, you know, say we'll do the roof. Okay, they're spending all this money on this house and now they're going to have to put on a new roof. Or the seller feeling like, you know, they just got gypped out of 10 grand because their listing agent didn't do a good job of negotiating for them. So aiming for a win-win solution is clearly what's best for everybody involved. Go ahead, Nicole.
Sure. So, and this could be kind of like a quicker mastermind today, because I feel like we can really talk a little bit more towards the end about some of the, and maybe throughout we can even talk about some of the stuff. But, you know, a lot of this is going to be communicating. You're going to be communicating with the client, and you're going to be communicating with the buyer's agent or the listing agent. And you have to remember too, you are really negotiating with multiple people in this transactions. So one, you're dealing with your client. Let's say you have the buyer. You're dealing with a buyer who has concerns that, you know, they had their inspection and there's multiple issues and they're thinking dollar signs, dollar signs, dollar signs. How much is this going to cost me after I buy this house? And one of the things that I find really important is when I work with a buyer, I point out every single thing wrong with the house that I can find before we even write the offer, because I want them to go into the inspection knowing most of the stuff that we're going to find. I want them to know, yeah, there's a water stain there, or yeah, there's past water damage, or that's not a GFCI outlet. You know, I want them to know a lot of this stuff. So then when they go into the inspection, they're kind of already prepped and ready for a lot of the concerns that are going to come up, which is going to help you with your negotiation with them. Because there are clients, we've all had them, who want to total up the entire inspection report and say, okay, that's going to cost me $30,000. So I want $30,000 off the price. So it's really important to negotiate with your clients going into the inspection, knowing, hey, there are going to be a lot of things. We're not going to nickel and dime the client or the seller on every little thing. We cannot do that. Because I'll tell you what, I don't know how many of you have bought or sold your own homes, but my first house that I bought, it was, or not the first house, it was the second house that I sold. It was a new build. We'd only lived there for 2 years. And my realtor at the time, this is long before I had my license, sent over a 2-page repair list of everything that they wanted fixed. And I was like, this is a 2-year-old house. Like, what are you talking about all of these things? Now, obviously we know that inspectors show all the stuff they have to tell you all the things that they find on the inspection report. But I was so angry about this 2-page list, and my agent did not negotiate on my behalf whatsoever on these things, nor did I know that I could negotiate back and say, no, I'm not going to do all these things. She just gave us the list and said, these things need to be done before closing. So, you know, things to think about when we're negotiating, whichever side you're on. But understanding, the biggest thing in my mind is understanding what is important to them. So one thing one of my inspectors does, and I love it, I don't know if he's on, Dan, his team, when they're on, the first thing they say is, first thing, do you have any concerns about this house? Because now they're going to know what are the biggest concerns. So that's that clear communication. Now they can really focus and make sure that they feel comfortable. Yes, the roof is a little bit on the older side, but you probably have at least another 5 to 10 years on this potentially. Like they feel better. Same thing when I get that inspection report, I'm going to ask them, okay, what are your biggest concerns? Now, if you have an engineer, you're going to get a spreadsheet. You might get a spreadsheet with all the stuff. If you have other people who are more emotional, they're going to, they might have some certain things that are going to be a concern for them bigger than some of the other things. I always want to hear what their concern is. It's not necessarily what my concern is. So maybe I have a couple other concerns, but I need to hear what theirs are. Obviously, I'm going to tell them what my concerns are, especially because this is what we do all day, but I'm not going to make it a bigger deal than it actually is. So mold in an attic. How many times do we see houses that have mold in the attic? To some people, that's going to be giant red flag, walking away. But then
yeah, because they hear mold.
Yes. But then you stop and say, listen, mold is in like 90% of the houses we inspect. It's super easy to fix. We can get it tested. We can do all these things. Let me negotiate with you on what we want to do. And then I can go back and talk to the other agent and they're going to understand that that's a health concern and we can get that fixed.
And usually like the moisture in the attic that's causing the mold from the majority of the inspection reports I see is because the bathroom exhaust fan is ventilating to the attic instead of the exterior. So it's being able to properly explain that to your buyers or sellers and letting them know, okay, this isn't that big of a deal. This is how we fix it. And this is how we remediate it. And then they're like, oh, okay, it's not that big of a deal. Right. I just had an investor that got an inspection on a property and it's being sold as is. And she heard that it has knob and tube wiring. And I said, okay, well, it's pretty common to have knob and tube wiring in the attic because, the attic isn't used very often. It's usually wired just for the attic light and they will rewire the rest of the house. And she goes, no, he said it was throughout the whole house. So I look at the report and it is not wired. It's not throughout the whole house. There's an entire electrical box for the remainder of the house. So it was being able to explain to her what was actually going on. And it wasn't as big of a issue as she thought it would be. Same thing with like the grading. In Ohio, we have, it always comes back saying grading needs improvement because, the water washes away the grading. So if they have not seen a lot of these inspection reports or done a lot of real estate, they're not going to know this. They're going to think something's wrong. It's going to be thousands of dollars to fix. How do you even fix it? So again, effective communicating to letting them know it's, maybe it is as serious, maybe it is not, but we see these reports day in and day out. So it's our job to be able to explain to them in terms that they understand the severity or not of the, issues on the report.
Yeah. And, looking at all this stuff, we have to the first thing here, clear messaging, conveying your points clearly to avoid these misunderstandings. So there's going to be a lot of misunderstandings. There are a lot of questions during the home buying and selling process. So being able to communicate effectively is going to be really important in negotiating, whether you are talking about pricing a home, whether you're talking about the things that need to be done. Staging, this is one I get a lot of pushback on, staging a house, like why it's important. Having that communication and knowing the value of some of this stuff is going to help you in negotiating for these things throughout your career. And so there's a good example here, rewording some of the things that you might say. So saying like the property's a steal at this price. Some people may not agree with that. They might think that this is too high. So, looking at it, saying the market value of similar properties is about $500,000. We're going to offer $480,000. That's, they're going to feel like they're getting a discount you know, but you also, again, tread lightly on some of this stuff, because if you have somebody, I recently had somebody who wanted to come in $65,000 under asking because they didn't feel like the house was worth it. Well, guess what? They had multiple offers on that house. So it makes sense, you know, it's a perceived value thing. It's just being clear about it, explaining to them. Even when you're, you know, negotiating certain things, I've had clients who they've said, you know, oh, I want them to pay, you know, X amount of dollars for occupancy after closing or rent back. And I will say to them, you understand that this could very well put you out of the running for this house if you don't want to offer this up for free. Most other agents and buyers are going to offer that for free. And having them make that decision, it's going to rest on their shoulders, not mine. So we're going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about that in a second. Actually, we'll just talk about it now. When I am, well, do I want to talk about that now? It doesn't matter. We'll talk about it now. Sorry, this is how my brain works. So one of the things that I have really taken into my negotiations with my clients, no matter which side of the fence I'm on, I will say to them, you know, especially if you have a difficult client, this is something like, write this down because it helps so much. I will give them 3 options. Here are your options. This way, I am not telling them what to do. I am giving them the situation and the potential outcome, and they get to choose.
You don't ever want to tell them what to do, because then they're going to hold you responsible if they don't like the outcome.
And we're going to talk about this in a second about taking your emotion out of the transaction. We'll talk about that in a second. But here are your 3 options. You could either accept all of these repairs and we can move forward, or you can say, no, I won't do any of these repairs. And we can offer that to them and see if they're willing to move forward. Or we could counter them and say, I am willing to do a couple of these things. These are the specific ones I'm willing to do. We're not willing to do the others, but maybe we'll offer you a concession. And then giving them the outcome. If you say yes, that you're going to do it all, they're going to order appraisal. We're going to move forward. We're going to get you to closing right on time. Okay, if you say no, they could counter back and say, okay, well, now we want concessions instead. Or, hey, we're willing to walk away from this house if you're not willing to negotiate on us or with us. Or, you know, they could counter back again if we do the counter, and basically giving them these options. When you're in a really tough situation, like let's say I had this recently, one of my sellers wanted to try to break her contract and not sell her house. So I had to give her actually she really had 2 options. It was either sell the house and move forward, or don't sell the house and risk getting sued. And you would get sued by the buyer, potentially the agent. You know, there's a whole lot that goes into it. So, you know, giving her all of those things, she was able to look at them and realize, oh crap, if I try to break this contract, I'm screwed. So you know, I took my emotions out of it and I'm like, this is your choice. If you want the potential to be sued and you will lose, you can do that. That's fine. But I need you to understand this is a very important decision that you're making right now, but leaving it up to her. Okay. So do you have anything to add to that, Nikki?
Nope.
Okay. So nonverbal cues, a lot of these negotiations, I feel like we're doing over the phone or even via text. So we have to be careful. I would say some of this stuff should be talked about on the phone or face-to-face. Text can be, you know, we know there's no tone in text, but people read tone in text. So we have to be really careful sometimes. If you're in person, using body language, facial expressions really will help enforce what you're trying to say or reinforce what you're trying to say. Body language, you want to make sure you're, you know, coming across as you care. I mean, that's one of the biggest things in this business is that your clients feeling like you care about them and their well-being. You want to make sure that they feel comfortable, that you're hearing what they're saying and that you understand where they're coming from and why it's important to them. That's what most people want in this business, in any business, in life. People just want to be heard. All right. Nikki, you want to take this one?
All right. So effective communication, open-ended questions. So questions that cannot be answered with a simple yes or no, and they are requiring detailed responses. So this is an effective way to communicate with your clients is by asking them the open-ended questions, because then you get to know a little bit more about what their end goal is. Um, Details matter when it comes to negotiating. Does your buyer want a seller concession, or do they actually want the repairs to be completed because they are not handy or they don't know anyone to do it? So finding out, exactly what it is they're looking for so that you can best negotiate on their behalf. So, encouraging dialogue, ask questions that prompt your buyer or your seller to give you more detail on what their needs or concerns are. So, I'll use the example of my knob and tube wiring. I said to her, "Okay, what is your main concern about this?" And her initial response was, "I won't be able to get insurance on the house because the inspector said that um insurance companies won't insure a house that has knob and tube wiring." Okay. Now that allowed me to have a different perspective and look at it. Where is the knob and tube wiring? Is it in just one area? Is it throughout the entire house? And figure out how we can go about that. Do we need an electrician to come out there and see what the cost is to upgrade the wiring in the attic to not be knob and tube? Because then I come to find out another one of her concerns are, if I'm already buying this as is, how much money am I going to have to invest into this to get it to where I feel like it needs to be a safe rental property? So, asking those open-ended questions to really understand the motive behind their reaction to these things is what's very important. I think that sums up this page.
Yeah, I mean, no, I think you're right. I mean, having to ask those questions about things like, my client who didn't want to offer up free occupancy. It's like, can you tell me why you're concerned with offering this free occupancy, knowing that other people are going to be offering it up? What is the hesitation with that?
Right.
And they said, well, we ran the numbers and this is what we need. And I said, okay, you do realize you don't have another payment. Your first payment is not until whatever month. Yeah, we understand that. I'm like, okay. I just want to make sure we understand we're all on the same page here. And then, of course, they didn't get the house. And then they blamed me. That's how that goes, though. All right. So here are some terms for negotiations with examples. So some of these anchoring. So setting the initial offer to establish a starting point for negotiations. So I feel like sometimes this can get a little confusing with people because I think a lot of times people want or they expect like the back and forth, the back and forth. A lot of times it's not really how it goes. A lot of times you can really just kind of, if you are clear about what you want and why you want it, most of the time the seller is going to be pretty, understanding, or maybe they already know it's an issue. So they were kind of expecting it to come up. So if you're clear about what you want, just be very upfront and honest about where you want to be. And you can start a negotiation. You could start high if that's really something that you want to do, or start low if you're buying the house and you want to come in under asking. We just have to be reasonable because we don't want to offend people. I've also dealt with clients who lowballed somebody. They were actually writing an offer with a different agent, lowballed so badly that the agent would not even respond to any emails after that with them. And they ended up coming to me and having me write the offer up, and they ended up getting it because they wouldn't even take an email from the other agent. So it was pretty crazy, but we have to be careful about how we are writing up offers and how we are going through our negotiations, regardless of which side you're on.
Well, and I even think, at least this is how I do it. When I have a buyer that is dead set on offering a lowball offer, I'm going to call that agent ahead of time and just kind of preference, hey, I understand that this offer could be insulting. I have to abide by my client's needs. I wanted to give you a heads up that, I'm sending this over to you. I feel like in doing that, you're opening that communication line and letting them know that you're not being an ass. Like you understand that what your clients are asking you to do is kind of not what you think they should be doing, but in return, I've gotten a response, and then they'll respond back to me saying, hey, when your clients actually want to submit a reasonable offer, let us know. And I pass that along to the client.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have to do what our clients ask. And, I had the conversation with a client just the other day. It was a house that had only been on the market for 2 days or 3 days. And they said, well, we really can't afford the house, but we can afford this price. Can we just write an offer for that price? And I was like, we could, but in this market and that house and that neighborhood,
Mhm.
it's not really going to be worth our time doing. I really think you should potentially walk away from that one and start looking at houses that your, fit your budget a little bit better. And sometimes that's also a negotiation, helping them to understand why we can't be looking at houses that are 500,000 when you can afford 460. We can't really do that unless it's been on the market for 2 months. And even still, it's probably at that same price because the seller didn't want to come down in price. So, we have to be careful with how we're strategizing with some of the stuff. Okay. So the nibble. So asking for small additional concessions after the main agreement is settled. So small requests can be granted because they're going to seem minor in comparison. So a lot of times when I'm negotiating with concessions or with repairs after inspection, I will say, oh, there were many things that came up on the inspection report, but thankfully, I talked my clients into it. We're only going to ask for a couple things that are the bigger concerns for them. That way, if they are just forwarding my email on, which this is something that I have been noticing a lot lately, that agents are literally just, I don't do this personally, maybe you guys do. They just forward the offer right over to the other client, like literally forward my email. So I am like being way more particular about the way I write up my offer emails and the way that I write up my concerns in emails, because I want, if they're just going to forward that on, I want them to like feel what we're feeling. So I'm being way more like, oh my gosh, my clients just love your house. I've even written stuff in there about like, they're a lovely young family. Cause this email is between me and the agent. If the agent's
Mhm.
sharing that with her client, that's not my problem. So if we're talking fair housing, like that's not going to fall on me. But I will put a lot more information in there than I used to because I've been seeing them just forwarded along anyways. Anyway, so small requests are going to seem like a more reasonable. You're not asking for, 20 grand price reduction plus all these other things, plus a 2-page inspection, request. We're not asking for all of that. But you might say like, well, we know that these things are going to cost us money, but if you're willing to, throw in that deep freezer in the basement that she didn't want or that you were going to take, we'll consider just calling it fair, and somebody might be okay with that. The flinch. So reacting visibly to an offer demand to signal that it's unacceptable. So it indicates your dissatisfaction and can prompt the other party to reconsider their concession or their position. So if a buyer offers a low price, you might say, oh, that's a little bit lower than where I think we should be. Because, and this is what I know I did it. And I think I did it unintentionally when I talked to my clients the other day about it. I was like, oof, I don't know. I don't know that we should go that low. That could be considered pretty offensive by the seller, especially they just came on the market. So obviously their agent told them that this house is worth this price or probably close to it. So if we're going to come in that much lower, I don't know if that's going to work out in your behalf. And I swear, like those reactions sometimes, sorry, I just read Bill's thing.
About the fair housing.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a second. So, I feel like that having that reaction, it will also help them cue into what the seller's reaction might also be. Bill, what I was saying was in my emails that when I'm sending over offers, let's say, you know, we all know about like clients writing letters. A lot of times we won't share those letters with the buyer or with the sellers until they've already had their offer accepted, because we don't want to worry about fair housing concerns. Fair housing typically falls on the agent representing that seller. So if the seller is giving that letter to them and they're making that decision based on, you know, taking that offer based on what the letter says, and then it could be turned around back on them later saying, well, you didn't take our offer because our offer was, you know, this much, but we weren't, you know, I don't even know how they would know, honestly, how it would even come up that you know, a single mother got the house with a handicapped child over somebody, you know, I don't know. I don't know how it would come up, but I am writing in my emails something that I feel like could pull on the heartstrings of the seller. Obviously, if it's a, you know, investor, it's not going to matter so much, but I'm putting in my emails more stuff about like just gushing over the house, really, or saying, I've been working with these clients for so long. They're a young family. They've been, you know, they got a baby on the way. They're just so excited about this house, because I am writing this email to the agent. The agent is supposed to then share the offer with them, not necessarily what I'm saying in my email. But I'm seeing a lot, what I was saying is I'm seeing a lot of agents just forward my email right on to the seller. So if it's in there, now they have that information and I'm not really doing anything wrong. So I don't know. I don't know if anyone else feels differently about that, but I don't feel like I'm doing anything wrong saying that in my email to the agent.
I just find hard to believe that they're just forwarding your email right directly to their client. Do you know
Literally,
that's true?
I have seen it multiple times. So just the other day, I put an offer in on a house just on Sunday, and I don't understand how I got it, but she forwarded it to the seller. So I had the seller's email, and then it said offer 3, sent it to her or to him. And then she responded back to that email saying received. So I then saw the forwarded email and literally just forwarded it right on. And I've seen that with negotiations. I've seen that with other stuff where they're emailing and then the client is emailing the agent and me back. Like I'm included. It's so bizarre. But so I've just started being a little bit more conscious of how I'm wording my offers, how I'm writing up my offer summary, highlighting things, like saying like, we're going to offer free occupancy because we know that they need this to get their kids, you know, through school, like just wording it to make it sound a lot more like seller friendly. And I mean, it's kind of worked.
So the seller must have reply all on that thing, and
Maybe could have. I don't know. The seller never replied, but I saw the email saying offer 3 because that cued me in to call her because she told me she didn't have any offers. So I was like, hey, how many offers did you end up having? She's like, oh, we end up with 5. And I was like, oh yeah, I saw I was offer 3. And she's like, oh yeah, yep, you were 3. And I'm like, what the heck?
So weird. So you think average offers, you just forwarding it on here?
Yeah, and I have had that happen many times. Like
I've never seen that happen.
Well, I don't know. It's happened many times where I've seen where they said, just sent your email over to the seller. Okay, well, I'm gonna start writing all the stuff in the emails. I'm gonna make them feel warm and fuzzy, and I'm gonna explain how much my clients love that house and the neighborhood and why they want to be there. I'm just gonna essentially put all those cards on the table, and hopefully it works out. I mean, why not?
Well, and I think it's important to let them know, you know, their motivation behind the house and why they want it and why they wrote the way that they did. You know, maybe they've wrote on 6 houses and lost all of them, and their kids have to be in the school district by, you know, August. So they're on a time crunch. And I feel like it tells the sellers, okay, they're not going to screw us over on random stuff because they're at a time crunch. And, you know, this is a necessity for them, where somebody else, you know, it may be a different story.
Totally. Yep. All right. Some of these names are so funny. The bogey. I don't even know the reference. I know it's like a golf term, but I have no idea what it means. So pretending a minor issue.
Bogey.
What I say?
Isn't that, I didn't hear, I
Oh,
guess you
bogey,
didn't say it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So pretending a minor issue is a significant issue to get more concessions or to have them agree with you more. So it kind of diverts the attention and can result in more favorable terms. So this is something that I would say, you know, you could kind of, I don't know, be a little bit more dramatic about the concern. My client's really concerned about the mold in the attic, you know, or because I mean, I have had clients that have written on offers that were as is, or where it was, you know, we said health, safety, and structural only, and it came up with something, and I was just like, you know, this is such a concern for my clients. You know, we're not going to ask for anything except for this. Do you think your clients would be willing to do that? 9 times out of 10, they're like, yeah, let me talk to my client, and they'll do it. Like, so sometimes I will bend the rule a little bit, even if I say something like, I had one where I said we weren't going to ask for anything unless it was over $1,500 for repair or replacement. And I came back and asked for something that was going to be like $600, and they did it. So, you know, I still feel like there's room for negotiation, even if you already said you weren't going to do that. Now they could have come back and said, yeah, that's not $1,500. So no, we're not going to do it, but they might, you never know.
Well, and if you don't ask, you don't know. So, you know, if it's a mold situation, I had a buyer who was extremely allergic to mold. And so that was obviously a health issue for them. And we just told the seller, hey, I know you're selling as is. We wanted to let you know that unfortunately we're going to have to walk from this deal because of this issue, unless your seller is willing to make the repair. And the seller made the repair because they didn't want, you know, to lose the deal.
Yep. And I feel like too, there's a lot of clients who, will kind of sellers, especially, that will kind of be like, you know, kind of like, they're kind of like, you know, hard about it. Like, I'm not going to do anything. I don't want to do anything. But then when they get down to it and they're like, oh yeah, we'll do all that stuff. I mean, I feel like most sellers know some of the concerns of the house. They know that there's things that might come up, whether they're going to be honest and tell you or not. They're going to know that there's probably some things that are going to pop up. They probably know about that outlet that doesn't work, or they probably know about that mystery switch in the house, or, you know, maybe they even know about, you know, water in the basement or something that had happened. You know, there could be a lot of different things. So either way, that's a great one that you just talked about, the walkaway strategy, saying we're willing to walk away if we can't get these things taken care of. I mean, and I have had clients who wanted to walk away from houses, and the seller was like, wait, we'll do this. We'll take care of all this stuff. You know, oh, you want the crawl space encapsulated? We'll do that. Oh, you need this done? We'll do that. Like, they're willing to do the stuff because they don't want the deal to go. They don't want the house to go back on the market. They really just want to get rid of the house. That's where you have some prime negotiations there. When they start saying, oh, we'll take care of this stuff, that's when you're like, okay, let's see what we can get away with here. And let's see how much we can actually get. And I tell you what, your clients are going to love you dearly if you're able to get them everything that they've asked for, or that they would want, or even something that they didn't know they wanted. You know, sometimes I'll have a client who will tell me that they want $1,000 concession. So I'll ask for 2,000 and just see if I can get them to agree to it. Most of the time they'll just agree to it. And then I'm like, hey, guess what? I got you another $1,000. And they're like, what? Oh my God. You know, and those are the experiences where they're going to remember, she got me more money, you know? So that's a great thing. Bracketing, basically, this is the same thing as the last slide. They were talking about kind of knowing where the middle ground is and trying to work towards that middle ground. So starting a little bit lower, knowing that you're going to probably have to come up in price, and the buyer might know that they're going to have to come up in price. Seller might know that they have to come down in price. So overcoming objections. So really validating the concerns. So acknowledging and empathizing where your client's coming from. We've talked about that numerous times already. Understanding where their concerns lie and why, right? So if you have a client, like Nikki was just saying, I just had one very similar, highly allergic to molds, dust, all that stuff. So asking for things, you know, understanding what those concerns are can give you the leverage to ask for the things that you need and to explain why it's so important to your client. understanding their situation. Maybe it's like this definition on here, or this example on here, understanding that the close date's a super important thing because they maybe they have a lease that's up at a certain time, or understanding that, you know, you might be closing on your new home on this day, but you're not closing on your current home until 3 days later, or vice versa. What are you going to do in the meantime, right? Or if you're closing on your current home and now you're going to be homeless for 3 days, understanding and trying to overcome those things before they get there. But understanding and validating your clients' concerns, making sure that they know that you're understanding and you're going to do what you can to help them. Using data, turning objections into opportunities. So changing the focus. So, you know, maybe they say they want to buy this house, but they want to update the kitchen, or they want to redo the carpets in the house because they're gross. You can always say to them, hey, we can offer a credit, or, you know, offer a credit off. We could ask for a concession. That way you guys can have that money in the bank account, you know, and explaining to them how the concession works. And, you know, a lot of times that works out much better. A lot of times, even in negotiations for repairs or concessions, I will usually go towards concessions instead of repairs, depending on what it is, because we don't want, you know, a bad repair job done or a cheap repair job done. We want them to be able to do it on their own. Reframing objections. So again, turning those objections in or around. So if changes that focus, that's the same thing. It says the same thing on both of these, but reframing your objections. So saying like, if they're concerned with, oh my gosh, I can't even think of something. If they're looking,
like what if their kitchen, like say they're concerned about having to update a kitchen per se, because even though it's not a safety concern, it's something that kitchen updates can cost a lot of money. So finding a way to like reframe their thought process on it. Okay, this you can do X, Y, and Z to this kitchen. Maybe we're talking about painting the cabinets to give them a little bit of a facelift to get them through a year or two until they can save enough money to do what they actually want with it. Maybe if the countertops are nasty and they want to do solid surface down the road. Okay, well, what if we, you know, painted the countertops to get us by, give it a facelift, but it's not costing you an arm and a leg right now, you know, because a lot of buyers, they want move-in ready, they want brand new, but they can't afford it because they're putting all their money towards the down payment and everything else. So it's finding solutions that can give them the outcome they want, but not cost them a lot of money, and give them the option like, okay, you can splurge in a year or two when you save enough money, but for now, you know, this is an option.
yeah. Or like when people say, oh, it's a little bit closed off here. And then you look at the wall and you realize they could easily open up a doorway to make it much wider, have a much better flow. Really, like as realtors, we know what some of the potential is in these houses. So we can kind of reframe some of their concerns. Maybe the objection has to do with, you know, money, like, or maybe it's, you know, well, I don't have a lot of money for down payment. Okay, well, let's try to see if we can get you a grant, or let's see if we can get you something like a FHA loan or a rural development loan or something where you won't have you don't have to do a down payment. Maybe that we could do something like that. So kind of figuring out what their concern is and helping them get to that solution that's going to get you to the closing table. We talked about this earlier. This is my pro tip. Literally, this was the hardest thing for me to take, you know, to deal with, was really removing my own emotion from the transaction. I get very involved in these transactions. I care so much about my clients. I care so much about the outcome. I find myself sometimes getting really frustrated or even angry about some of the things, or whatever it may be. I'll tell you the quick story. So I had a client who they were selling their mother's condo. It had been pretty much, she had lived there for 40 some years and never really opened the windows. And the person who was buying the house was very obsessed with making sure that the windows all function properly, as they should, right? I'm not denying that. However, some of them were pretty sticky. They didn't slide easily. So we agreed to have the windows professionally cleaned and the tracks cleaned out. Well, they didn't do a very good job cleaning the tracks out. I went over there, cleaned them all myself, all on my own, took the 45 minutes out of my day to go and do that. When the agent went back to the house later, she called me and was like, this is ridiculous. These tracks are not clean. And I got very frustrated. And I was like, the house is 43 years old. Yes, the tracks are not super clean. I didn't have my toothbrush today. I cleaned it personally myself with paper towel, and I got as much dirt and grime out of there as I possibly could. I didn't have a vacuum. I did my best. Well, she argued back and forth with me, and we argued about how the addendum was written. We had argued about all this stuff, and I just, and the agent was very nice, but she had her clients back and I had my clients back. In the end, they asked for an additional $200 to have the tracks cleaned. Why it's going to cost $200 to have window tracks cleaned, I don't know. But I went back to my client and I was heated. I was so heated. And I was like, I can't believe this. Like, I went over there, I cleaned it, you hired somebody, all this stuff. Now they want $200. And he's so cool and collected. And he was like, Nicole, you're very upset about this. And I was like, I am. I'm so frustrated. At this point, I'm like laughing about it, right? I'm like, I'm so frustrated. Like, we're bending over backwards for them. And he goes, it's $200. Let him have it. And I was like, I wish I could be as cool and calm as collected as you are right now, but I am so upset about this whole thing. And he's like, it's fine. It's $200, whatever. Let her have it. Clearly she's got a window fetish, which was the funniest thing to me in the world. But it ended up, we gave the $200, we got to closing, everything went fine. So, removing that emotion though, I'll tell you what, the emotion in this business will take years off your life. So if you can remember, this is not your transaction, it's theirs. So we just need to remove our emotion out of it, give them the facts, give them the data, validate their concerns, and let them make the choices. We just have to help get them to the resolution that they want. All right, closing the deal. So to summarize some things, so you want to make sure that you're summarizing your agreements. Make sure that when you're negotiating, this is something that I see, and we're going to talk a little bit real quick. I'm going to talk about addendums. I am so specific. I should have put an example in here, but I am so specific on my addendums of who's doing what, by when, what we want back from them, everything. So I'm not just saying, seller agrees to fix the electrical or put GFCIs in the kitchen. I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say very specifically, both seller or purchaser and seller agree that the seller will hire a licensed contract or a licensed electrician to replace the GFCI units in our outlets in the kitchen. And we want a paid receipt no more than 7 days prior, or no less than 7 days prior to closing. Very, very, very specific, because I don't want Uncle Joe coming over to fix the outlet, and then next thing you know, it doesn't work. And now there's no warranted work. We have nobody to call if it's not working. They could literally just put a GFCI outlet there and not actually connect it, but it looks like a GFCI. And I have had newer agents have something like that happen. And, you just have to be very specific. So make sure that you're on your agreements, you're being very clear on who you want to do it. If you have a specific contractor that you want, or whatever it may be, just be very specific. Put everything in writing, make sure everything is signed. Emails, texts, all that stuff, doesn't matter. You can agree to whatever you want in a text. It's not going to hold up. It's got to be on a contract, and it's got to be on an addendum. Ensure that the contingencies are met. Verify that things are working properly, or make sure that everything that they did is done. I have had clients bring their inspector back to verify that everything was done correctly. So make sure you're also giving yourself time. If you're going to do something like that, don't do the walkthrough 20 minutes before closing, do it the day before. So if there are major issues, you're not walking into those issues an hour before closing. Make sure that you are keeping your communication open. I swear the deals that go the best are the deals where I'm talking to that agent all the time. As long as you're keeping that open line of communication, things are going to be a lot smoother. Same thing with your clients. The more that you're communicating with them and checking in on them and making sure they don't have any questions, the better the whole experience is going to be for everybody. And then obviously celebrate your success. I always bring a closing gift to our closing, and I've been getting in the habit of giving thank you notes to the other agent. If it's a really tough closing, a really tough deal, I might even bring a bottle of champagne for them or a bottle of wine for them if I know that they've been put through the ringer on this one. So make sure that you are really finalizing everything, getting everything locked up so there's no confusion, and celebrate your closings. I'm going to go through the chat in just a second. Next week, Nikki and I are going to have Travis on again. He's going to be talking about retirement planning for realtors. So that's going to be a good one. If you guys want to talk to Nikki and I about how we can help you with your business, if you guys are interested in changing brokerages at all, you can scan the QR code. That's going to go to our Calendly, and you can set up a time to talk with us. And hopefully we can figure out how we can help your business together. So let's see. Reading the chat right now. How do you get concessions in a multiple offer situation? Oh, go ahead, Nikki.
Has anyone downloaded our appraisal packet template, or did you see it on there? We put it in the group.
I don't know if anyone, well, I don't know. Nobody said anything in the chat yet, but we did put that,
Okay.
We did put the appraisal pack on the group chat, or sorry, in the group. So you guys can download that. It was also sent out in your email through our newsletter as well. How do I get concessions in a multiple offer situation? Same way as I always do. Ask for it later. I do not ask for concessions right away. The only time I have done that was in my last offer that I wrote. We put $2,500 in concessions because the house needed new carpet and a new deck. And I spoke to the agent prior to that, and we talked about the fact that it needed a new deck, and it was on a condo, so it was a really small deck, but he agreed that they would give some sort of concession for that if we needed it. So, or if we wanted it. So I wrote it right up in the offer, but normally I would not ask for anything until after inspection. I try to do things very methodically, so I'm not overwhelming the seller with, okay, we're going to come in lower, or we're going to come, we're going to come in over, and then we're going to ask for all this. I just had a client. We went $15K over, and then also offered to pay some of the seller's closing costs to get our offer accepted. They accepted it. My client did what he was supposed to do. He was doing his due diligence. He found out that the 4 houses on this block were all built by the same builder within the same year time period. 2 of the houses already had septic fields entirely replaced. So he knew that this one was older. It had been inspected by the county and it passed. However, it said it was like 50 some years old and would be needing to be replaced soon. So he decided he wanted to do a price reduction of $15,000, what we went over, within 24 hours of getting that offer accepted. So I really tried to get him not to do that, because obviously that looks really bad on us to say, we're going to give you 15K over, but then we're going to take it back an hour later or 24 hours later. It looked bad on me, but I explained he has been doing his due diligence. He's looking at county records. Like, I explained the whole thing. And in the end, they said, nope, just send us over the mutual release. And we did, we walked away. But again, that was my client's decision. I tried to navigate through that with him and let him understand that they're probably not going to do this, especially since we just got this offer accepted yesterday. And I was right. So Dan said with the NAR stuff, concessions are going to play more of a role. Yes, we're going to have to see how that all shakes out. Bill has talked about the electrical fire. I assume that's based on the knob and tube and all that. Yeah, we definitely don't want any of that stuff, or knob and tube, or the GFCI
Uncle Joe
stuff.
replacing the receptacles and those kind
Yeah.
of things. We want licensed electricians taking care of that stuff.
Yeah, we don't want any of that. So we don't want any of that mess. So yeah, I mean, it will come back on you, right? Who is the buyer going to call when the repairs weren't done properly? They're not going to call that agent. They're going to call you, and you are then going to have to be figuring it out. So if you can write things up very specifically, I have written things up even specific but vague, if that makes any sense, on certain items. Like if I don't know if the, let me think of a situation. A furnace, something was wrong with the furnace, we'll say. I'm not going to put on there, have a licensed HVAC company repair HVAC or repair furnace or something. I might say something like repair or repair by any means necessary, or replace if suggested by the HVAC company. Like I might make it a little bit broader. So then if something comes up and it's maybe way more than they expected to pay, they agreed that they're going to fix it by any means necessary. So I put wording like that in there. Now they could come back and say, that's way more than we wanted to pay. We're not going to do that. How about we do this or that? Okay, we can negotiate on that, but this is what we want up front. So, negotiations change. I mean, an addendum can change throughout the whole process. I mean, you might have multiple addendums for different things. And that's just how things go. But does anybody, we're at noon right now. Does anybody have anything they want to add? Nikki, do you want to add anything before we?
Nope, I think we covered it. And again, like if you come across anything that you have questions about, like throw out the question in our group,
Sorry, you were
our group
cutting out,
chat,
but I
whatever,
think
and we're all here to help each other.
You were cutting out a little bit, but I think I know what you were saying. She was saying, we want you guys to utilize our Facebook group. So if you guys have questions or you need advice on something, please feel free to put it in the group chat so we can have everything in there. And not the group chat, I'm sorry, in the group on Facebook. We're happy to help. We're happy to jump in. If you have a question specific for Nikki or I, or you just want to kind of crowdsource something, or you have any kind of questions out there, need a referral, put it in the group, and I'm sure we could find somebody for you, or we can get you some answers. Anything else before we wrap up today? Nope. All right. Everyone have an awesome day. We'll see you here next week. We're going to be talking about the retirement planning. If you guys have anything, put it in the group. We'll talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.